Funding for the North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership Hometown Debate is provided by viewers like you, with additional funding provided by North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives, the John William Pope Foundation, State Employees Association of North Carolina, North Carolina Association of Defense Attorneys, and North Carolina Advocates for Justice.
The candidates for North Carolina Treasurer debate the issues in Statesville. Next.
The North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership Hometown Debate is a production of UNC-TV in association with the Institute of Political Leadership and the Greater Statesville Chamber of Commerce.
Hello, I'm Kelly McCullen with the North Carolina Channel. We are in Statesville for a debate between the Republican and Democratic candidates for North Carolina Treasurer. This event is presented by the North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership in partnership with the Greater Statesville Chamber of Commerce. Asking all the questions this evening to distinguished journalist Elizabeth Cook of the Salisbury Post and the Statesville Record and Landmarks David Eibach. The candidates debating the issues tonight in alphabetical order: Dan Blue III, representing the Democratic Party, and Republican Dale Folwell. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Let's move to the first question tonight by coin, well, not the first question, the opening statement, I should say, by coin flip backstage. Mr. Folwell, you will open us with a 3-minute opening statement.
Thank you and good evening. It's great to be back at Iredell County. As we travel across this state, we realize that all roads to Raleigh have to come through Iredell County, and it's great to be back in this community. I'm a graduate of the IOPL, but our campaign has something that's very similar to that word called IAPL. It stands for integrity, ability, passion, and listening. That's what our campaign has been about as we approach and apply for the office of State Treasurer. Someone asked me today at a speech that I gave in Greensboro at lunch, am I prepared for the night, and am I prepared to be the next State Treasurer? You can go to my website, dalefolwell.com, and learn about what I've done. But I think it's really important for the people of North Carolina to know who I am. I'm a married man of 28 years, a father of 3 children, and I've spent almost my entire life in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. But I've had 3 careers. I've had a blue-collar career, a white-collar career, and a public service career. And the reason that's important is that the people that I will have management of their retirement and health care are blue-collar, white-collar, and retirees across the state of North Carolina. When I was a blue-collar worker, I was a garbage collector, a motorcycle mechanic, someone who cleaned toilets, and anything that I could do economically to help my mother, who is a single parent, through that whole period of time of our upbringing. I can tell you that what I learned as a blue-collar worker is that you never let anything get between you and your work. Secondly, you always raise your hand to volunteer for the toughest jobs. And thirdly, anytime that you make a mistake, you disclose it. And those things that I learned as a blue-collar worker have held me very good stead as I go through the rest of my career. When I was in the investment business, I was with Alex Brown, which is actually still in business today. It was founded in 1800, over 216 years old. And then my public service career has been 8 years on the Forsyth County Board of Education and 8 years as a member of the General Assembly. During that period of time, I focused on saving lives, saving minds, and saving money. The famous investor Warren Buffett once said, "You can't tell who's swimming naked until the tide goes out." As far as the office of the State Treasurer, the tide is out. Our health care plan is bankrupt, and our state pension plan, one of the largest pools of money in the world, has tremendous headwinds that have to be attacked and solved for the people of North Carolina. My name is Dale Folwell, and I look forward to the next hour.
Dan Blue III, 3 minutes, opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you to the Institute of Public Leadership. Thank you, Chamber of Statesville. And thank you all for being here this evening. I appreciate you having us. And I'd also like to thank my opponent, Representative Dale Folwell, for being here this evening and allowing us to debate the pressing issues that the Treasurer's Office faces going forward. because that has a lot of meaning both for the office itself and for the people of the state of North Carolina. My name is Dan Blue, and I'm running to be your next state treasurer. I grew up in Raleigh, the son of 2 civil servants. I attended public schools in Wake County, graduated from college with degrees in biomedical engineering, went back for degrees in law and business. My wife and I, Tracy, met here in North Carolina. We've been married for 8 years, and we're the proud parents of 2 beautiful little children, Kennedy and Evan. Kennedy is in her first grade classes. Evan is in preschool. He's at the same preschool where my wife, Tracy, teaches. If you don't know a lot about the state treasurer, don't feel bad. Many people don't. They understand certain aspects of it. They may know that the treasurer's office is responsible for our pension fund, or they may recognize that the treasurer's office is responsible for the state health plan. If they are on the city council or on the county commission, they know that the treasurer's office is responsible for debt issuance across our entire state, and we use that money to fund infrastructure. The treasurer also sits on the community college board, the state board of education, and probably more boards and commissions than anyone other than our governor. But in many ways, our treasurer's office acts as the bank for the state of North Carolina. It manages our investments, and it helps the state fund its long-term vital programs. And I've spent my entire professional career in the private sector. I've spent time as a banker, as a healthcare entrepreneur, and I currently work as a bond attorney, where for the last 7 years, I've raised over $700 million for the state of North Carolina, for our private colleges and universities, to build roads, to build dormitories, to build laboratories in pursuit of our missions. The next treasurer of North Carolina will face tremendous challenges, but will also have some tremendous opportunities ahead of him or her. And I look forward to discussing both of those challenges and those opportunities with you this evening. And again, I thank you for your time and your attention.
Mr. Falwell, I'll direct your attention to David Eibach for the first question of this debate.
Let's talk about House Bill 2. On Monday, 53 investors ranging from those managing public pension funds to asset managers to foundations released an open letter saying the bill invalidates the human rights of individuals and has troubling financial implications for the investment climate in North Carolina. They want to see HB 2 overturned. If you were state treasurer, how would you respond to such a letter? What impact do you believe HB 2 could have on the state's economy?
Thank you for that question. I think I'm like most North Carolinians who wish that House Bill 2 was not in existence, or the Charlotte Ordinance that precipitated it. But the fact is that one day, the issue of House Bill 2 will no longer be an issue because it's in the court system. But at the end of the day, after that happens, North Carolina is still going to be facing a $30 billion health care crisis, a pension plan that is unfunded. And the job that I'm applying for is to solve and fix the problems of the state treasury. I had nothing to do with House Bill 2, but I'm unaware of any bathroom issues that are occurring at the treasurer's office currently. But I also tell you, as the former Assistant Secretary of Commerce, whether it's a federal or state law, that I obey all laws as the head of that agency, and I will do the same thing as the Treasurer of North Carolina.
Mr. Blue, same question to you.
HB 2 is problematic from the Treasurer's perspective. Just this week, we had a number of large businesses, as well as some of the companies that invest in North Carolina and manage parts of our pension, that announced that they were not in support of HB 2. Now, first, as a precursor, I should note that HB 2 is not our first trip down this road. A few years ago, we had Amendment 1. Fortunately, Amendment 1 was blocked and rejected by the courts. I believe that we know a little bit about how that worked out. But when it comes to HB 2, what you're looking at is something with the potential to really cause damage to North Carolina's economy. And because it causes damages to North Carolina's economy, it risks our AAA credit rating. Let me give you an example. HB 2 has currently put $500 million of federal funding to the state of North Carolina at risk. That's $500 million of federal funding that doesn't go to the state, which means we have to back up and make other amends to pay those bills, to fund those programs. That, in turn, damages our AAA credit rating, which also makes it more difficult for us to raise the money that we need to invest in infrastructure and other public works. I'm glad that they're looking to reverse it. I think that the Treasurer's Office has to pay attention to it, as any piece of legislation that has that sort of impact, that sort of detrimental impact on our state and its ability to maintain its economy.
Mr. Falwell, rebuttal.
Well, I don't know where Mr. Blue came up with those numbers. I'm a CPA and I've never heard those numbers. But the fact is, it's important for not only the audience that's sitting here, but the viewing audience. Over the next 45 minutes, we both have an opportunity to answer questions emotionally, politically. I'm going to answer my questions pragmatically. The fact is, the single biggest threat to North Carolina's AAA bond rating has nothing to do with House Bill 2. It has to do with the unfunded pension and health care liabilities of North Carolina. That is what the Standard & Poor's and the rating agencies are going to be looking at. And at the end of the day, this can's been kicked down the road for 35 years. The result of that can being kicked down the road is we have teachers and beginning highway patrolmen and state workers who can no longer afford family premiums for the state health plan. That's the job I'm applying to fix. And by fixing that, that's what's going to maintain North Carolina's AAA bond rating.
Mr. Blue, 1 minute.
Very quickly, Representative Falwell, you should know oh too well the impact of Amendment 1 or HB 2 and bills like that on our economy and our reputation. Now, the Treasurer's Office has to be involved simply to make sure that the General Assembly and anyone else who purports to be representing the state isn't inflicting self-inflicted wounds in our economy and preventing us from actually doing what the Treasurer's Office is supposed to be doing. We'll stick to the numbers. We'll make sure that we revise and review the numbers as appropriate. But we've got to make sure that we talk about everything that's going to impact the state, our economy, and our ability to service our debt.
Mr. Blue, the second question is yours and will be asked by Elizabeth Cook.
Well, what about the management of the state's retirement system? Is it status quo acceptable, or do things need to change?
Status quo is never acceptable. But when we talk about change, we're talking about incremental change. By most standards, our pension fund is funded at 95 to 96%, and it's getting adequate returns on its investments, although the last couple of years have experienced a very dicey market. The areas where we need to make considerable improvements are finding ways to reduce the cost. In this interest rate environment that we have, where we've got countries with zero interest rate, negative interest rates, and a stock market that's as flat as what we've seen and as volatile as it's been as of late, we've got to make sure that we're reducing our fees where appropriate without introducing new risk to the system. For that very reason, I intend, as one of my first items of business, to bring the people that are managing our assets here to North Carolina to have a larger discussion about how we're managing those assets, about transparency, but most importantly, about the fees that we're paying. If there are ways for us to reduce those fees, either by using our weight or bringing more of our responsibilities back in-house, I'm all for them. But at the end, we have to make sure that we protect that pension. Our retirees have earned those benefits. Our workers are working on those benefits. Our state has invested successfully in its pension for the last 77 years, and I don't want that to end on my watch.
Mr. Falwell, 2 minutes to answer.
Well, that's ironic because I'm the gentleman who has proposed to bring all the investment managers into our office. As a matter of fact, my opponent is the candidate of status quo. He's been endorsed by the current treasurer who wants to keep things exactly the way they are. So as an accountant, not a lawyer, let me show our audience something. This is the actuarial report of the state pension plan. It shows that it's supposed to be earning 7.25%. It has not achieved that rate of return in 15 years. In addition to that, last year it earned less than 1% and paid out $600 million in fees to Wall Street. Whose money was that? That's the state employees' money. That's the teachers' money. That's the professional firefighters' money. That's the PBA, the FOP, the majority of the sheriffs, and all the other groups that have endorsed me and trusted me to fix the state pension plan. This is completely unacceptable, and I will reduce these Wall Street fees by at least $100 million. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that that's just a start. The fact is that the pension plan is assuming a rate of return that everyone in our viewing audience knows is absolutely ridiculous. Something that hasn't happened in 15 years, and I'm telling you it's not going to happen in the next 15 years, is not a good rate of return. Go to your web, go to Google, CalPERS, The Economist, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, story after story after story that talk about that 7.25 is a rate of return that's not going to be achieved. Now, if we don't attack this problem, it's going to attack things that you care about: education, roads, infrastructure, and all the other core functions of state government. Because these two items, just the pension, just the health care, are going to require almost 20% of the state budget for the next 15 years.
Thank you, Mr. Falwell. Next question, David Eibach, you'll ask Dan Blue.
Earlier this year, lawmakers proposed a constitutional amendment to cap the personal income tax rate at 5.5%. The bill proposing the amendment passed the Senate but was not taken up in the House. How would such a limit affect the state's bond rating?
Most likely based on the signals that we've been getting from Moody's and Fitch's and Standard & Poor's, the bond rating agencies. That sort of legislation is frowned upon simply because it reduces the state's ability to act in case of uncertainty. The best case to use for it is actually the state of Colorado that passed similar legislation. We call it the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. And their legislation hamstrung their government for a number of years simply because they weren't able to raise enough revenues to pay their bills. They were downgraded by the ratings agencies for the very reason that they had no flexibility remaining in their budget. Because they had no ability to raise additional revenues. Now, North Carolina is a little bit different. They've taken the right steps to create pools of money, trust funds, to protect against a rainy day. But what Moody's looks at, what the rating agencies look at, is to make sure that when that rainy day comes, that you're not going to miss a debt payment. That would be failure. That would be catastrophic. And that's why they look at this sort of legislation. And they downgrade states that pass that sort of legislation. Now, before I move on, I've got a couple of more seconds. If we're talking numbers, we need to make sure that our numbers are right. Representative Falwell mentioned that we hadn't beat that 7.25 for the last 15 years.
On average.
Well, that's different on average, and that's a very different word from what he just used, because the numbers say that in 2014, we returned 15.88%, in 13, 9.52%, in 11, 18.48%. So we've got good years, we've got bad years. What you have to look at is how we're doing, but when it comes to setting the next hurdle rate, the rate of return that we have to meet, you have to look forward. Both of us have stated that both of us believe that the rates are too high. The difference is that I don't believe I can unilaterally change them. There's a process in place to make sure that people, including the trustees of the retirement system, are evaluating that number each and every 5 years, because that's good practice. They come up with a number, we agree with the number, we'll work to make that number more realistic going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Falwell, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Of course, the treasurer cannot unilaterally change that number, but the treasurer can lead. And leadership means listening to the smartest people in the world who are telling us all across the world that a 7.25% rate of return is way too high. So let's go back to the question that you asked. The bill that was proposed in the Senate this year that did not pass the House is far different than the bill that my opponent's trying to convince the audience happened in Colorado. That's what's happening in this campaign, and it's really tragic because when you're talking about $100 billion, it's really important to be precise with what you say. And precisely speaking, that bill that you asked me about is far different than the one that was ever passed in Colorado. The fact is that we already have that legislation on the books, but it says 10%. This piece of legislation reduces it to 5.5%. The income tax rate next year in North Carolina is going to be 5.4%. So if the rating agencies had a huge issue with this, why wouldn't they be looking at it right now, even if the bill hadn't passed? Because our tax rates are already going to 5.4%. That's my point. The rating agencies are going to care about how you attack and solve the unfunded pension and health care liabilities of this state. That is going to be the criteria to determine whether North Carolina has a AAA bond rating. Now, it's important to realize that most people don't wake up thinking about AAA bond ratings. But I can tell you the state having it has a huge positive impact on Currituck County, Iredell County, and every business across the state. And my job as the next state treasurer is to preserve the AAA bond rating of North Carolina, and I'm the only one standing up on this podium that has a track record of doing anything like that.
Mr. Blue.
Certainly. In my professional life, I've been a banker and I'm currently a lawyer. I've read plenty of offering statements, and I've worked with the rating agencies to determine what it is that they're looking at when they look at one of these issuances. Let me tell you right now that if you're a municipality and you're raising money in this market, as part of your bond disclosure, you are disclosing the potential impact of legislation like HB2, and you're looking at the impact of legislation that restricts our ability to raise our income taxes or our taxes as necessary. So you may not see a big difference between 10% as the current statute says, and 5.5%, given that the current rates are just a tad beneath that, but the rating agencies do, and that's what matters.
Rebuttal.
Please, 1 minute, Mr. Falwell.
I guess my opponent is saying that if we ever hit a recession to where our cash coming into the state was not as high as it should be, that he's proposing to raise taxes during a recession. That's the exact wrong thing that we need to be doing for the people of North Carolina. The fact is that this administration has inherited a lot of bad problems. I inherited $2.7 billion IOU to the federal government for unemployment benefits, billions of dollars of cost overruns, a budget that wasn't actually balanced because they were accelerating what they paid and collecting what they earned earlier. The fact is that these are all very important issues, and I have the experience to deal with those on a sophisticated level.
Mr. Falwell, the next question is yours, will be asked by Elizabeth Cook.
State Treasurer Janet Cowell was criticized earlier this year for joining the boards of two publicly traded corporations. The State Ethics Commission pre-approved her taking those positions, and Cowell pledged to recuse herself from any matters pertaining to those companies. How do you feel about the State Treasurer serving on a corporate board, and what other ethical pitfalls are there that the Treasurer has to look out for?
I'm glad you brought up that question because I received a call from David Rainey from the News and Observer asking me the very question. And David asked, he said, would you like to get back with me? And I said, no, David, I won't. And he said, well, I'll have to put you down as no comment. I said, no, David, I won't have to get back with you because I'm going to give you my answer right here and right now. I don't need a law to tell me what's right and what's wrong. And for any sitting treasurer to accept any kind of outside compensation, especially those from corporate boards, while being the keeper of the public purse of North Carolina, is absolutely wrong, and I came out strongly against that. Now, my opponent came out and said, and I quote, opportunities like this will be considered on a case-by-case basis after being vetted through the Ethics Commission. That's what my opponent said. And then when the light got on this subject, my opponent changed his mind. So I'm, Bethy, saying this to you as a reporter. I don't think that you can tell a reporter one thing and then 2 weeks later you unilaterally change your opinion without going back and just saying, I thought about this and I came up with the wrong answer the first time. The fact is, my opponent's first response to that issue is that in opportunities like this will be considered on a case-by-case basis. Let me tell you what the opportunities are as the next state treasurer. The opportunities are to make a generational difference in North Carolina's future, because if we don't solve the health care and the pension crisis of our state, it's going to take money away from things that you care about. The second opportunity, and the total opportunity, is to be loyal to the participants of the plan. That is the role of the state treasurer, is to be loyal to the participants of this plan. And when you take outside boardship money, and when you do all these other things, the fact is you are not being loyal to the participants, and you are not holding up your oath of office, and it's wrong, and Dale Falwell will never be engaged in anything like that, nor have I ever in 25 years of public service.
Mr. Blue, 2 minutes.
Certainly. First of all, the question as it was presented to me was, would you serve on a corporate board? And yes, I stopped to think about it because, as you've already said, Representative Falwell, language is important, numbers are important. It's very critical that we are precise in them. My knowledge of the state treasurer's office and other state treasurer's offices tell me that Richard Moore in 2004 served on the board of the New York Stock Exchange. It was widely touted as a phenomenal thing, a wonderful thing, in order for public pensions to actually be represented on the very board that was that was charged with regulating the people executing the exchanges. I also know that the state treasurer of Connecticut served on the municipal mutual bond board to make sure that, again, those investments were going the right way. The question about compensation never came up. When it did come up, I issued a second statement saying that no, I would not serve on a corporate board because I would not want to be compensated by outside corporate boards while I'm pursuing the pursuits of the state of North Carolina. The opportunity is to make sure that the public pension and that public investors are heard on Wall Street, on Main Street, and everywhere else that our people's money is invested. Now, if that means that you take away the opportunities simply because you don't use a precise definition of what a corporate board is, so be it. And I've said that I would not serve on a corporate board, and I still won't serve on a corporate board. The job of the state treasurer is too much. The potential for distractions is too much. the potential to be engaged in conversations about how you're spending your time instead of how you're focusing on the people's money and the infrastructure that needs to be built and the health plan that needs to be saved is far too much of a distraction. So I will answer for you again, as I've answered before. I would not serve on a corporate board. Not for pay, not for no pay. I'm more than satisfied serving on the various boards that the state of North Carolina appoints its treasurer to.
Mr. Falwell, 1 minute.
Well, what my opponent didn't say is that he ever called the reporter back to tell him that he'd like to clarify his position on that. He went forward as if that was his position all along. I'd like to invoke the name of a very famous poet from Winston-Salem, Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou said the following: when someone shows you who they are the first time, you should believe them. And when my opponent said the first time that opportunities like this will be considered on a case-by-case basis as cleared and vetted by the Ethics Commission, you should believe him. I will never serve on corporate boards. My loyalty will be to the participants of these plans and the taxpayers of North Carolina.
Mr. Blue, 1 minute rebuttal.
Sure. Fortunately, this can be easily resolved. You can go back and look at the reporter's initial questions. You can go back and look at my initial statement. You can go back and look at my revised statement. You'll see that at no point does he say that I said I would accept compensation, because he never asked the question. When the article ran, I didn't choose to rebuke it, at that time, because we were issuing a press release and I didn't think it was going to be that big of an issue. It turned into an issue. I clarified my statement. I invite you to look on the internet, find out for yourselves.
Mr. Falwell, next question will be asked by David Eibach.
How do you determine fair compensation for someone who manages billions of dollars? The executive director of the $87.9 billion pension system recently received an 81% raise, adding more than $105,000 to his annual pay. As state treasurer, how would you address salary issues and judge employee performance?
Thank you for the question. The way I would judge that is exactly the same way that I judged it when I was the head of an agency twice as large as this, which is the North Carolina Division of Employment Security. The fact is with compensation issues are very important, but the optics and the visuals of this treasurer approving a $108,000 raise when we have state teachers and state employees who haven't gotten raises for years, hardly, they just got one this year, and when that very person came out and ridiculed the state retirees about them asking for a 1.6% pay raise, that tells me more about what somebody's thinking more than about the pay. At the end of the day, we have to attract the best talent into the state treasurer's office. I have a track record of doing that. When we reformed the unemployment system of North Carolina, we did it with a team that someone else drafted. We didn't get rid of a bunch of people and bring a bunch of people in. The fact is that we have great state employees who worked for me at DES and also worked at the treasurer's office that in many cases no one's ever listened to. I set a culture of expecting the best out of people and wanting the best for people. As my grandfather once told me when I was complaining about making 50 cents an hour working at a Shell station, his response from High Point was simply this: they told you what they were going to pay you when they hired you. That's my answer to your question. And the fact is that all of these issues are very important, but we have enough talent in this state. This is the second biggest financial market in the world, that I think that we can do a lot of this management inside of the state of North Carolina and inside the treasurer's office, and we can find the ways to properly compensate people to do that.
Mr. Blue, 2 minutes.
Certainly. I do believe that the optics are wrong. Although this gentleman has a market rate salary and most likely earned the bonus that he received, it's unfortunate that he received it in a year where state employees did not receive the raise or the benefits that they deserve, that they've worked for. I very strongly believe that we underpay our state workers. In this case, with the treasurer's office, this is one employee among many other employees that are outside of the purview of the normal pay schedule. I think that's a good thing. I think that it's very important that we have the best, the brightest, the most qualified people that we can managing our pension. I wish that more areas of state government were able to compensate their employees appropriately. When I managed a payroll with either of my two startups, I made sure that I hired the best, the brightest, and paid them accordingly. But most of all, I made sure that their compensation was tied to results. That's the sort of culture that I would expect to have in the treasurer's office. That's the sort of a culture that we should have across the entire state. because it's certainly the type of culture that rewards hard work and performance and leaves nothing to chance.
Mr. Falwell, 1 minute.
Just very briefly, you just heard a comment that we should have compensation tied to performance. The State Treasurer's Office paid almost $600 million in fees to Wall Street. And according to Ron Elmer, the former opponent in the Democratic primary of Mr. Blue, says that our performance over the last 5 years was 45th out of 50 states. So if you really believe that you're going to pay for performance, how is it that we're paying $600 million in fees, earn less than 1%, and our performance over that 5-year period was one of the last in the United States? That's not a clear example of paying for performance.
Mr. Blue, 1 minute.
But that's paying for unperformance.
And I don't think Representative Falwell was necessarily aiming that at me. I didn't enter in those conversations. I didn't execute those contracts. And I've stated that I intend to bring all of them back to review the performance that they're making and make sure that their incentives are aligned with our Treasurer's Office's incentives.
Mr. Blue, Elizabeth Cook will have your next question.
Yes.
Many of the state's school systems are struggling to maintain aging buildings and keep up with growing student population. For example, Robeson County came up with a $1.4 billion consolidation and construction plan that State Treasurer Janet Cowell and her staff opposed. They said, among other things, that the amount of debt was too high. How can local school systems address costly building needs without taking on what the Treasurer's Office might say is excessive debt?
Thank you for the question. That actually is near and dear to me. That story in particular is near and dear to me because my father grew up in that county. And as they pointed out, the opportunities that you have to uplift yourself from Robeson County always go through the schoolhouses. So having schoolhouses that are deteriorating or HVAC units that don't work in the hot summer months or the hot fall months, or in Robeson County, the hot spring months, is very concerning. What we have to do is make sure that first the General Assembly recognizes the issue that we have and that we come up with a better way of funding school construction. But then the second part of that, the key part of that, is we have to have a Treasurer's Office that is more flexible in working with our local communities, whether they are counties or municipalities, at funding their infrastructure needs. Schools are just the tip of the iceberg. We have to worry about water treatment facilities. We still have to worry about parks and recreational areas because we need more people to exercise and enjoy the beautifulness that's present here in North Carolina. But what that means is that we've got to put on our consulting hats to do the analysis, conduct the due diligence, but find ways to partner with the communities that are trying to do the very basic things that we are poised and created to invest in: schools, roads, facilities for all of our government, for all of our citizens.
Mr. Falwell, 2 minutes.
I think my opponent is confused about who has constitutional responsibility for building school buildings in North Carolina. The constitutional responsibility of building school buildings in North Carolina does not rest with the General Assembly. It rests with the local governments. And the fact is, I support what the Treasurer was doing on the Robeson County deal. But I'd like the opportunity to ask my opponent, there's been a lot of fundraising going on regarding that deal since the General Assembly left office. So have you been to Robeson County and collected money from people who are going to try to get that piece of legislation passed in the unlikely event that you're the next Treasurer of North Carolina?
Do you want to rebut? That's not part of the rules that you answer your opponent's question.
I will take a rebuttal
1 minute.
in a couple of areas. The first one is getting back to word choice. I appreciate you, Representative Falwell, giving me a lecture on constitutional law, very, very much. But as I said, the General Assembly needs to work on a funding mechanism. I'm aware that the General Assembly is not funding the schools, but they do send money to the school districts to build the schools. If we're going to make sure that our language is proper, let's make sure that our language is proper. Let's try not to bleed over and fit in our political points. Now, as it relates to fundraising, this is a big state. I'm fundraising all over this state in order to beat you, and I do intend to do that because it's that important to make sure that every bit of our state is heard. Robeson County is contributing. I've got family ties there. I know the people that ran the bill. It's important to make sure that everyone's heard. It's not going to influence my decision. It's not going to make me move one way or the other. Thank you.
David Eibach, you will ask Mr. Blue the next. You want the final rebuttal?
Yes.
1 minute.
Well, Mark, you don't have to answer this question, but I'm just asking you simply, do you support Treasurer Cowell and the local government commission's opinion about the Robeson County deal? Yes or no?
That's out of the rules of the debate, Mr. Falwell. We go to the next question from David Eibach to Dan Blue.
The state employees pension fund has been growing, but fees charged to the fund by outside managers are actually increasing at a faster rate. Since 2000, the pension fund has risen from $59 billion to $87 billion, while fees went from $41 million to $513 million. Is that just the cost of doing business these days, or should the Treasurer's Office do something different?
The Treasurer's Office should do something different. Now, it is part of the cost of doing business. Just to set context, out of a $90 to $100 billion pension that we're talking about, the $500 million to $600 million in fees is just about over 0.5%. And if you're looking at your 401k, you'll see that you're paying a little bit more than that. But the ultimate piece that we have to drive towards is lowering those costs, period. We're large enough that we shouldn't be paying what average investors are paying on 401k fees. We're large enough that we can internalize a lot of those responsibilities and eliminate cost. The key there is to make sure that we're eliminating costs in ways that don't increase our risk. Quite often, we leave the risk piece out of that conversation. We assume that we can bring it all home without looking at the disastrous results that the Treasurer's Office had in 2009. And just to go back to that, one day when the stock market began to crash, we watched our equities holdings reduce by about 30%. Looking at the reports from the Treasurer's Office, the investments that have been made since then, I will almost guarantee you that a lot of the contracts that have been executed, a lot of the arrangements that are in place, are there to reduce the volatility and make sure that we never have a disaster like that in our pension again. We can't afford it. We don't want the shareholders, we don't want the people with interest in the pension, our retirees, to ever wonder about how their money is being spent. And we may forsake some of the highs, but we will avoid the lows. The question that we always have to answer is, what are we paying for, and are we paying too much for it? And I fully believe that very, very early we'll get to the answer of that and we'll make the necessary adjustments.
Mr. Falwell, 2 minutes.
Thank you for your question. It gives me an opportunity to thank my wife, and who's been such an important part of this campaign. Cynthia is an artist and a singer, so that when she does something for you, you can hear it or you can see it. Your question was about something that's kind of invisible. You can't hear it and see it until somebody shows you a graph that looks just like this. This is my rendition of my wife. The fact is, these investment fees have gone up over 1,000% over the last 15 years. This goes to the heart of your question. These investment fees have to be reduced by $100 million at least. And I'm the person standing here who has a track record of bringing value to the participants of the plan. On top of that, I am the only candidate up here who's not been to New York City to raise money for this treasurer's race. When you raise money in New York City to become the next treasurer in North Carolina, it somehow finds its way into these fees. I have not accepted, nor have I been to any fundraisers or held any fundraisers in New York City, and nor will I, because the loyalty for the state treasurer, the keeper of the public purse, is to the participants of the plan, the hardworking state employees who are using their backs, their feet, their mind, and their heart every day to serve the people of North Carolina. These fees will be reduced when I'm the next state treasurer. And within the first 3 weeks of my treasury, I will figure out where the people's money is, who's managing it, how well it's doing, and how much they get paid. And it's all about value to the people of North Carolina, pure and simple.
Mr. Blue, rebuttal.
Absolutely. Representative Falwell's been in public office for long enough to know that it's possible to receive donations and contributions without allowing those to affect your decisions. We know that, or at least we assume to know that, because in his 8 years in the General Assembly, he's taken money from insurance companies, from various other entities. But I take it at his word that he's never allowed that to adjust or influence the decisions that he's made, nor should he, nor should any employee of state government or any elected official. I'm not going to do that. I know you wouldn't do that. It's bad news for the citizens of North Carolina, and it's terrible news for the retirees. Let's make sure we maintain our integrity as well as maintaining our precise language. Sir.
Mr. Falwell, rebuttal.
Well, it's very important to understand that these fees are being paid to Wall Street investment folks. And the fact is that these fees have to be reduced. And I will never accept any fee or any campaign contribution from anyone who is not trying to bring value to the pensioners and the people of North Carolina.
Next question will be asked by Elizabeth Cook of the Salisbury Post to Mr. Falwell.
State employees have a health plan that is the envy of many people who work in private industry. Is that as it should be, or should government employees' benefits more closely mirror those earned by the taxpayers who work in the private sector?
The state health plan is bankrupt. It has a $30 billion liability. This is the latest report that just came out of the Treasurer's office that shows that liability increased almost $4 billion last year. Now, why should people in this audience or in the viewing area care about that, especially those that aren't on the state health plan or the state pension plan? And the answer is that the state health plan is going to require almost $3 billion out of the state budget for the next 15 years. If we don't attack and solve the problem of taking advantage of the largest health care plan in North Carolina for the benefit of the participants, it's going to end up taking money from education, crime control, and public infrastructure. Now, let me tell you about my experience with the state health plan. I'm the person that took 6 years to get the state health plan on a calendar year. We had everything else dealing with our state health plan on a calendar year, but the state health plan itself was on a June 30 year. How are you going to incent people to keep up with their health care and focus on their health when it's on different orbits? I'm the person who worked hard to cut down on waste, fraud, and abuse in the state health plan. Our son broke his tib-fib about 7 years ago. And 14 days after he broke his leg behind Reynolds High School, I get a check like this for $550 made out just to me. And as honest as everybody is in this room right now, if you saw a check made out just to you from an insurance company, you'd think for 1 second it belonged to you. So I called the state health plan. They said, we refuse to send that to the ambulance company. Now, the ambulance company didn't refuse to answer the phone, dispatch, or transport our son to the Baptist Hospital. So then I put my CPA hat on, and I started thinking, Hayek and von Mises, famous economists, taught me that anytime you reward something, you should expect to get more of it. I found a lady in Winston-Salem who called the ambulance 22 times that year and collected one of these checks every single time. We can't determine if she ever went in the hospital, and we know she didn't pay any of it to the Forsyth County EMS. So my question really back to you and back to the audience is how many of those little things, that waste, fraud, and abuse, do you think that we're going to find in a $100 billion operation? That's where my optimism comes. And my second pledge in this campaign...
Hold on 1 second, Mr. Falwell. You got the wrap, and that left you 15 seconds, sir.
Thank you.
You're out of time. Mr. Blue, 2 minutes.
I apologize. Can you repeat the question?
Let's see, that was me, right? State employees have a health plan that is the envy of many people who work in the private industry. Is that as it should be, or should government employees' benefits more closely mirror those earned by taxpayers who work in the private sector?
Thank you. Let's start with the honest truth. If state employees' compensation mirrored that of the private sector, then perhaps their health plan should. But as we all know, it does not. So having a health plan that mirrors the private sector doesn't make a lot of sense. We really look at 3 different things when we're looking at a state employee's compensation. You look at their take-home pay, you look at the benefits offered under the pension, you look at the benefits offered under the health plan. If one of those is giving way, then we need to make sure that something else is there to make up for it. I believe that the health plan in this case provides some of that cushion to make sure that the value that we offer those employees is at least competitive with what their peers are getting in the private sector. And again, I think that's critical and important to make sure that we are hiring the best workforce that we can, because the citizens deserve that. So yes, I am okay having a health plan that is a little richer than what the private sector offers.
Mr. Falwell, 1 minute.
When I was the head of the DES, every time I heard of an employee of ours who were expecting their first child, obviously that's a blessed event. But the second thought that crossed my mind that if that employee made $35,000 a year, and there's a lot of state employees that make $35,000 a year, that person was going to have to start working 5 days a week, a month, just to pay the family premium on the state health plan. It's tragic that we have beginning teachers, beginning DES workers, beginning highway patrolmen and patrol women who have to work 5 days a month to pay the family premium of a state health plan that has 800,000 people in it. I have a track record of not only making money, but finding ways to save money, and that's why I'm proposing to freeze family premiums for state employees. Family premiums. We are driving away all of our young, healthy people off the state health plan, and that is one reason that we're in the condition we're in right now.
Mr. Blue, 1 minute.
And I'll get back to the broader conversation, which is that we need to make sure we're compensating our state employees properly. It is a shame that a family of four, like what my family will be when I'm on the state health plan, have to pay such an enormous amount for health care. However, we're facing that across America. The cost of health care is getting out of control. Now, if you believe that the state health plan is bankrupt, it's because by design we pay for the benefits each year. We fail to put away adequate money the way that we have in the pension. We're always going to have this conversation. And if we're not careful, every conversation will be about decreasing benefits or rising copays and premiums. It's time that we get out of that. It's time that we shift our attention to the big picture. We have to improve the health of North Carolinians, including those state employees, including the teachers and firefighters and everyone else on that state health plan. That's the only way to bend that cost curve. That's the only way to make it make sense.
Mr. Eibach, you'll ask the next question of Dale Falwell.
Can our state government afford to take on more debt, say to finance additional highway construction or other infrastructure? Or should we focus on paying down our existing obligations?
The state taxpayers and citizens just approved a bond referendum. It's my belief, not looking at the recent debt affordability study, that we need to focus on the debt that we currently have outstanding and figure out how we're going to pay for that, given the fact that our pension and our health care are going to take 20% of the state budget for the next 15 years. When I say 20% of the state budget, it doesn't even include debt service. It's a very important question and a very important topic. But the fact is that we're in a near zero interest rate environment. And we have to be very careful about borrowing more money right now in a zero interest rate environment to put more debt on the people of North Carolina. But at the end of the day, it's not the amount of debt that we're going to have, it's how we deal with these unfunded pension and health care liabilities. These pension and health care liabilities have been kicked down the road for 30 years. And they're very important issues, and they have to be solved in order to free up any room for North Carolina to issue any debt. I will tell you that I'm standing here as the head of an agency that took on $2.7 billion in debt and built a $1 billion surplus in 31 months. I know more about retiring debt, paying off debt, and building surpluses than anyone who's ever run for state treasurer.
Dan Blue, 2 minutes.
We should have a broad conversation about infrastructure. The American Society of Civil Engineers conducts a routine assessment of all 50 states and their infrastructure needs. The state of North Carolina got a C, with particular interest in areas like water quality, in areas like roads and bridges, in dams and avionics. When you talk to people across the state of North Carolina, many of them were dissatisfied with the $2 billion that we just raised in our bond issuance, because they wanted to see more money going into the key areas that they were concerned with. And again, water treatment facilities, roads, bridges. The question is twofold. First of all, can the state afford it? Every year the state does a debt affordability study. And this past year, at the beginning of the year, it said that we had approximately $8 billion in debt, which again is always more debt than you want to have. But when you look at the needs that we have as a state, places where we know we're going to need to invest, then the question becomes, what is the cost of not making those investments? When we have low interest rates as we do now, is it possible for our state treasurer and our General Assembly to manage their money and their finances wisely so that we are able to get what we need? Now, yes, my opponent was able to retire $2.7 billion of debt, but he largely did that with the General Assembly's help by cutting benefits. Is that what we need when the threat is facing the pension? Is that what we need when the threat is facing the state health plan? We've got to figure out a way. And I am convinced and I am pledging myself to make sure that we find better ways to finance our infrastructure development. But we always have to be mindful that when we start looking for better ways to finance them, we end up with toll roads. We end up with creative ways to get money from people simply because the state refuses to make the investments that we consider to be necessary.
Mr. Falwell, 1 minute rebuttal.
My opponent talks about my implementation of House Bill 4. This is House Bill 4. When you're the head of the agency and a governing body called the House and the Senate pass a piece of legislation and the governor signs it, doesn't matter who controls those chambers, Democrat or Republican, you have a responsibility of implementing the law. But the basic fact is, and the people of North Carolina need to know this, their unemployment system is like an insurance company. It doesn't get money from Congress. It doesn't get money from the General Assembly. It only gets money from the businesses of North Carolina. And the businesses of North Carolina, through surcharges for the last 15 years, are the ones that paid off all that debt and the $283 million in interest. But the untold story is the waste, fraud, and abuse that those hardworking state employees found at the Division of Employment Security. That was a big part of paying off that debt.
Mr. Blue, 1 minute rebuttal.
Absolutely. The reason our unemployment system ended up where it was because when we had times of excess, when businesses were doing well, we decided to cut taxes, so they did not make the contributions that were required into the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. It doesn't make sense, although it's politically expedient and mathematically possible, to reduce that debt by not going back against the businesses, but by cutting benefits for people that the system was designed to protect. Now, I don't care whether the General Assembly told you to do it or whether the governor told you to do it, it was wrong. It does give you a feather for your cap. It allows you to say that you retired $2.7 billion and you did it early. But again, we've got to look at the big picture. We've got to look at the impact on the families, on the economy. We've got to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
And that concludes the question portion of this debate. We must move to closing statements. Each candidate receives up to 3 minutes to make their case to the electorate. We begin with Mr. Falwell.
Let me clarify one thing. The individual who put the Unemployment Trust Fund in that kind of deficit was Dan Blue, Speaker of the House. So that is why the Unemployment Trust Fund did not have enough money to get through 9/11 and did not have enough money to get through the recession of 2008. It wasn't me. It wasn't the Republicans. Dan Blue, as Speaker of the House, is the one that cut those taxes, that put that trust fund in that position. As you think about hiring the next treasurer, I really want you to underscore the word hiring. This is not running for office. It's hiring a chief financial officer of the state. And the people of North Carolina are going to have to make a decision of them deciding who the next treasurer is and not Wall Street. As we go forward throughout this campaign, I really welcome my opponent every day of the week except Sunday. He can campaign with me from now to the election day. Because the fact is, the state treasurer is going to make the generational difference in the future of North Carolina. I got where I am, as I mentioned before, with my hands and my back and my feet, which ultimately changed my heart and my mind about the need to be educated. Many people who have endorsed me, the people that you trust, many who educate your children, the state employees, the Police Benevolent Association, the Fraternal Order of Police, the majority of sheriffs, the professional firefighters and first responders, which are represented, all these groups are represented here tonight. The people that you trust to carry out the core functions of state government are trusting Dale Falwell to be the next state treasurer. I take that responsibility very seriously. The last thing that any first responder needs to be thinking about when they leave the house every day is the safety and the security of their pension and their health care. I've spent the last 12 years in Raleigh saving minds, saving lives, and saving money. I did that on a bipartisan way. 21 major pieces of legislation through Speaker Hackney, Democrat, Speaker Black, Democrat, President Pro Tem Bass Knight, Democrat, Governor Easley, and Governor Perdue. I have a wonderful track record of working across the aisles and finding solutions to problems. That's what I do. That's what a mechanic does. A mechanic listens, a mechanic acts, and a mechanic fixes. I welcome your opportunity to visit DaleFalwell.com as we approach this campaign and learn more about what we're going to do. We are going to cut $100 million in fees from Wall Street. We are going to freeze family premiums. I will never accept any kind of outside compensation as the next state treasurer. And at any point in time that I don't perform what I just promised you, because talk is cheap, I don't think I deserve to be paid as the treasurer of North Carolina, and I will not accept my compensation.
Thank you, Mr. Falwell. Mr. Blue, closing statement.
First, I'd like to thank everyone who made this night possible, and for those of you who are here in our audience, and of course those of you who are viewing at home. I think this evening has demonstrated a few things, but first of all, you have a significant choice in who will be the next treasurer of North Carolina. You have competing views and contrasting mission statements, if you will. Now, I've spent my entire professional and adult life in the private sector. I have not served in the General Assembly, so the Dan Blue that he's referring to is my father, not me. I made my money and I've spent my time as a banker, helping healthcare and pharmaceutical companies finance their operations and advising them on where to invest their capital. I've spent my time as an entrepreneur in the healthcare sector, where I built companies that trained healthcare professionals and companies that built software that helped us lower costs by using information technology to spread information. And I've spent the last 7 years as a bond attorney, working with the Treasurer's Office to finance new infrastructure and working with local colleges and universities to finance their improvements. I've approached every challenge and every opportunity in those roles by building consensus, by building teams. You see, because unlike popular belief, Wall Street's not all Republican, pharmaceutical companies are all Democrat. We work across the table to make sure that we get results. Results are what's important, positive results. Now, our Treasurer's Office is more than just a pension plan, although that's very important, and it's more than just a health plan, although that's equally important. The Treasurer's Office encompasses nearly every aspect of public policy in North Carolina simply because it's where the money is. It makes sure that we invest long term. It makes sure that we have safeguards in place so that we don't end up with the next Flint, Michigan, so that our state is running properly, so that our bond issuances are being well received by Wall Street, and so that we're making each and every debt payment on time. Now, when we talk about the office, what you need in that office is not just a manager, you need a leader. And let me tell you why. The opportunities there are even larger than the problems. When we talk about the state health plan, we can't just talk about cutting benefits, increasing co-pays and premiums. We need to talk about health. That's why I've got the endorsement of people that are concerned with health, because there's a bigger picture at stake. We need to have long-term and focused conversations about how we deal with the actual cost of health care, not just how we pay for the cost. When we talk about the pension, we need to get beyond the returns on the investment, although that's important, or the internal rate of return, although that's critical. We need to talk about the future of retirement and what it means for our state employees, what it means to use the full authority of the Treasurer's Office to make sure that every North Carolinian has options in retirement that they didn't have before I took office. And finally, when we talk about the state's infrastructure needs, we need to find ways to make sure that we're making the investments now and tomorrow that will last us another 50 years. Now, my opponent's record is clear. He's told you, he'll make sure that he tells you. You can look at both of our websites for comparisons. The office has accountants, it has lawyers, it has CPAs. It needs a leader, someone who builds consensus, someone who moves our state forward, someone who helps us do what we're supposed to do, which is invest in this state, the state that we all love. I'm Dan Blue. I'm running for state treasurer. I appreciate your vote. You can find out more information at blue4nc.com. And again, I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, candidates. How about a warm round of applause for Dale Folwell and Dan Blue? And thank you for watching this Treasurer's Debate brought to you by the Institute of Political Leadership and the Greater Statesville Chamber of Commerce. Thanks to the candidates, thanks to the moderators, and most importantly, thanks to you for watching. Good night.
Funding for the North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership Hometown Debate is provided by viewers like you, with additional funding provided by North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives, the John William Pope Foundation, State Employees Association of North Carolina, North Carolina Association of Defense Attorneys, and North Carolina Advocates for Justice.